And that word ayam I also find in Surah chapter 2, where it says the person that hasn't got money to make an offering, they've got to fast for 3 days on the Hajj, and then there's another 7-day period.
I understand.
So those are literal days. That's the word 24-hour day then, right?
Yeah. So
but you're saying it's not 24-hour day.
What I'm saying is, there are some places where a day is specifically mentioned in the context of the 24-hour day we understand, and there are other contexts in which the term yom or ayam is used that is not clarified as to what specific time. So that would be translated as time period. Now the word yom or ayam, it can carry both of those meanings. The context tells us which. So if it's talking to a human being, says you've got to fast for, it doesn't mean 50,000 years, it just means you've got to fast for a day. But when it's talking about the Day of Judgment being 50,000 years, in the Hadith or the Quran, wherever that is, we understand that day is not a 24-hour day. Mm-hmm. So the word itself has the ability to be used in both ways. Both of those meanings apply. So the question for me is, what would be the importance of it?
Okay, so look, so from a Muslim understanding and perspective, that the Quran has been around forever, and the Quran is factually correct in all of its statements.
The Quran is factually correct in all of its statements.
Yeah. So that's a Muslim understanding. So me as a Christian, I don't see the Bible that way. Okay. Some Christians do. They see the Bible as inerrant, but I objectively critique the Bible, as I know you guys objectively critique the Bible. Yeah. But then I sort of don't think you guys objectively critique the Quran or your Prophet.
Okay.
So, and I have yet to meet a Muslim that I would sort of say can objectively critique the Prophet. So again, when I go to young Earth creationists, fundamentalist Christians, I sort of point out to the fact there's a whole lot of evidence that the universe and the world have been a lot longer. So therefore, the 6-day creation is just it's a story, it's an allegory, it's an analogy, it's an ancient historical story, basically, that forms part of the Bible. And the Quran has also picked up that same story and said God made the world, or Allah made everything in 6 days.
So, because there's different aspects of this. So one is the necessity for everything to be 24-hour period or not for Yom, and we've clarified that, right?
Well, you sort of have,
we've given you our perspective on it. We've given you our perspective.
I'm going to just go and pray. Back in
about 5 minutes. What are you praying? Okay. So that's one thing that we've clarified, that for us, there are contexts which tell us how to apply this word. So the context is if it's specifically a human thing like fasting, as in 24 hours. If it's talking about, we created the heavens and the earth, and then that's talking about a period of time which is unspecified. The main, and the importance for me was a question because we're not a young Earth creationist. We don't subscribe to there's nothing in us that requires us to believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. There's nothing to do that.
Yep, I understand that.
And the only time where science and Islam would come into conflict, if they do, would be about some sort of explanation about the natural universe, and then we can have those discussions. I don't see the relevance of the question with that. I mean, and the other aspect of it is that for Muslims, the Bible we don't believe was copied from the Quran. We don't believe that. So, would there be overlaps in information or similar information found in both of those texts? So if you assume that the source is the same, so I'm not saying that the Bible is the thing that was given to Jesus, peace be upon him, but if you assume this is revelation from the Creator, just like if you go to the old professor to learn soil science, and they're teaching different generations of people, the old generation and then the one that follows, the fact that they've got the same information is because it's from the same source. You wouldn't say that the first student copied from the second student.
No, but sort of the way science is progressive. So sort of what I learned 48 years ago at university, showing me age, is different to what the science that, well, it's generally the same, but it's improved. So sort of science is a basic an improving pool of knowledge.
So do you know, have you heard about the paradigm shifts that are required for science to change theory.
Yeah. So I've read sort of Thomas Kuhn's.
Thomas Kuhn,
So Thomas Kuhn's the scientific cycle of scientific resolution, or the cycle of scientific.
So there's a dogma. Or not dogma is probably the right word, but there's a consensus that is established about a particular concept.
Yep.
And there has to be a significant amount of evidence and changing thinking before the dogma is overturned, even if there's evidence to the contrary.
Have you read Kuhn's book?
Yeah, I think, I've read it a long time ago, but I've read it.
Yeah.
And that's what he says. He says for us to change our scientific models, we have to change the way we think. And that process is a sociological consensus amongst the scientists before we come to that conclusion, a change in the paradigm.
Well, basically, the way that I remember, and I actually write in my book. So I wrote a book called In Search of an Elusive God back in 2019.
Okay.
So, which is kind of based on the apologetics I used to speak here 35 years ago. So I've got a whole chapter devoted to paradigm shifts and to kind of sort of Kuhn's things. So basically, he sort of says that science has a particular way of looking at things, and then there's what he calls an anomaly.
Yeah.
So that anomaly doesn't
that data
fit,
that doesn't
it
fit,
doesn't fit in the paradigm.
Yeah.
So you go through this, what he calls a crisis point. Science goes through this crisis because it's found this anomaly that's there that doesn't fit in. So it's got to move the paradigm so that it embraces the new anomaly. And,
but before that movement of the paradigm, there has to be a build-up of a critical mass of people who agree to deviate from the paradigm, and that's the sociological aspect.
Yes,
so when enough scientists are willing to accept the anomaly needs explanation, this is when the paradigm shift will happen.
Yeah.
We've got to find another way to explain this data point.
Yeah, but you're right. So it is sociological. So there might be only one or two, but those one or two kind of, the other guys objectively look at it and they say, yeah, well, actually, sort of this is true. But there will be some diehards that still hold to the old position, and you know, they'll sort of stick to that position.
So what? I know science is very important for you, from obviously the way you're discussing.
Well, it's my business. Yeah. So, you know, probably like medicine is to you.
Absolutely. So in terms of reconciling things that appear to be not in conformity with science as we understand today and your faith, or even say if you're going to ask me my position, how do you go about reconciling these things? What trumps the other?
Okay, so for me personally, I would say generally, I'm not saying all the time, but generally if there was a conflict between, say, the Bible and science, I would generally go with science and dismiss the Bible. Okay, whereas you get a lot of other Christians, they would say the Bible is the absolute truth, and therefore if anything that contradicts that absolute truth, they would kind of sort of say that they'll go with the Bible, and they say the Bible trumps science, but that's not to me.
Okay.
So, and I haven't met a Muslim who is kind of different to fundamentalist Christians, who also kind of takes that sort of thing. But do
you understand the reason why?
I kind of do, because there's it's kind of in science there is a thing we call confirmation bias, and you know.
There's something hanging from your beard.
Do you want to change it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's just that.
Bit of fluff. Yeah. So there's a thing called confirmation bias in science, where basically what you do is you'll sort of cherry pick something that kind of suits the narrative that you believe in, and any evidence that is contrary to that. But that's not how science works. So sort of science basically develops through Karl Popper. You've got falsification. So falsification, or peer review if you like, is extremely important. So those peers have got to go through that process, and they actually attack the hypothesis and challenge it to make sure it's true. And that's why peer-reviewed science is extremely critical. So you've got to have people, you know, that are prepared to critique what is being said.
So there's many aspects to this, but if you're willing to hold science as the ruler that you're going to measure, because you believe the Bible is revelation. I'm assuming that. I want to ask it in the question form because I want to make sure.
So not every part of it. Now, I think you might remember, you actually were surprised by my my baby in bathwater analogy.
Yes.
So you sort of said you've never heard any other Christians held that position. So I'll just repeat it for the benefit of the watchers. So my position is that the Bible is a combination of baby and bathwater. So the things in that have no value at all to me whatsoever. They're not part of my Christian walk. It's not part of my life. So I would say sort of 99%, you know, to repeat what I've said on the live streams, is baby, and maybe 1 or 2% is bathwater. And there's an example, for instance, in Corinthians, when Paul said women should be silent in churches. So I would see that as being not applicable today. To today. But the Old Testament is different. I would see the Old Testament, to me, is probably more 50-50. And I've said that on live streams, and I still hold that position, that there are some things that... There's a lot of Zionistic tribalism in the Old Testament. You know, like, for instance, they hold David up as being this great sort of, king, the ultimate the ultimate times of Israel. But David, he went and killed 300 Philistines and cut off their foreskins and gave that as a dowry to marry the king's daughter, to marry Saul's daughter.
The Old Testament is problematic.
And I see that's just barbarous. That's just crazy and silly stuff. So I don't see that as necessarily being a sort of good thing to do. So to me.